What is going on, everybody? So this week I just started sitting down to start watching some college tape for the upcoming draft, and it really got me thinking, what would it look like if we redrafted last year's draft today with perfect 2020 hindsight vision? And I thought it'd be fun to make a video about it. So this is going to be obviously a fun hypothetical experiment, but it is also a cool way to talk about, what teams made out like bandits in reality with some of these players that, had we done a redraft, they wouldn't be able to get these guys down the board where they did. And inversely, a chance to talk about some teams that maybe would do things a little bit differently had they gotten a second opportunity. This also gets interesting too because so much has changed with these teams. Team needs have changed as maybe veterans have either come in or stepped up on their team. We also, in the draft in April, thought the upcoming quarterback class was going to be filled with a bunch of different options. As we now know, that probably isn't going to be the case. So do we see these quarterbacks get pushed up the board a little bit more? Lots to discuss here today. If you do enjoy today's redraft, please do hit that like button down below. It really helps me out and helps this video in the algorithm get more views and all of that. But also, I have a stretch goal for this one. If you guys like this video enough and show it with that like button, 3,000 likes, and I will make a second round off of this draft here today. So let's go ahead and get started. With the number one overall pick, there's certainly some conversations to be had here, at least on whether or not the Titans would redraft Cam Ward number one overall. Obviously, they are looking at potentially getting the number one pick again this year, which would put them in a position to draft one of these upcoming quarterbacks. Like I said, I just sat down this week to get into the film on these upcoming prospects, so I don't have firm opinions on if guys like Mendoza or Simpson would be higher perceived than I did Cam Ward coming out. But for this exercise, I'm going to have the Titans still taking Cam Ward. I think in that situation, for him to kind of keep his head above water is the term I keep using with him, but I firmly believe that's how you have to look at this season. He has not played poorly, but he hasn't played well either, but it'd be very challenging for him to step in with just everything has been wrong, right? The offensive line some weeks is a disaster. The receivers, though they found some fun players in this draft, have largely not been good enough. So many miscommunications and just the chaos of the offensive coordinator and head coach situation. So many pre-snap penalties. It's just not a well-coached team. Might actually be their biggest issue when you watch the Titans. So I think the fact that he, to me, in the last month, has shown that Cam Ward continued to get better throughout this rookie season. He hasn't played bad. I mean, the turnover questions that he had at Miami, is he going to have too many Jameis Winston-esque YOLO throws? There haven't really been too many of those at all. And I think just his overall professionalism and the way he carries himself, I think this team would bet on him again moving forward. So Cam Ward's going to stay as the number one pick. Then at number two, and this is going to be the Cleveland Browns. I went ahead and reversed all of the draft day trades. I think those are very much a part of the drafting process, right? Depending how the board falls or doesn't fall, you may or may not make some of these trades. I think for this experiment, it makes sense to go back to where things were when the draft started. And that put the Cleveland Browns on the clock at number two. And in this scenario, I definitely do not think the Jags are on the phone offering anything close to what they offered to move up for Travis Hunter, right? Like, we'll get to that with the Jags at number 5, but they aren't given the equivalent of 3 first-round picks for that one player again, and that was just kind of a price that Cleveland couldn't say no to. So I am going to have them sticking and making their pick here at number 2, but it becomes a challenging conversation because we've seen kind of the ascension of Jackson Dart, kind of getting into the mix of the conversation of these top 5 to 10 picks or so. Cleveland obviously needs a quarterback. They're rolling out there with Shedeur right now. The Dylan Gabriel thing just wasn't good enough. So you're thinking about Jackson Dart, but I do think in that scenario, I think you are still looking ahead at opportunities to draft quarterbacks coming up, being realistic about, okay, maybe it is Simpson or Mendoza this year, or maybe they are going to wait a whole nother year and go the veteran route as they sort through their offensive infrastructure that's frankly a disaster in Cleveland. And I think Jackson Dart has shown a lot of flashes. I don't think it would be crazy to pick him here, but I don't think it's realistic if you're drafting as the Browns to say, yeah, let's drop Jackson Dart into this. That'll fix our offense. I just don't think that's reasonable. So I think if you're Cleveland, you do think about best player available. You do think about, maximizing getting a player worth the number 2 pick. And I'm going to go with Abdul Carter here for the Browns. Now, he's had I think, up and down rookie season. Emphasis on up and down. He has shown so many of those flashes you expected from him as a pass rusher, especially the juice, the bend, some of the inside counters. Want to see him get a little bit bigger, continue to develop his play strength. That'll help him against the run and add a bull rush to his pass rushing package that can, really get him to reach his potential. That I very much think he's on mostly the right trajectory. There's been some recent team suspensions for missing meetings and stuff. That's something that is I just don't love it, right? I'm still picking him number 2 here, but it's something that makes it harder, I think, to draft Abdul Carter. The fact that he hasn't been all green lights in terms of the practice behavior and all of that. So it's a little bit of a harder decision here, but I think the opportunity to pair Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett, and by the way, I don't think you take Mason Graham here, right? That was their guy. He just hasn't made the impact of a top 5 pick. I think Abdul Carter getting to be mentored by Myles Garrett would be incredible. And to be I know he's a number 2 in New York, but to come into a defensive infrastructure that's just better, they're just better coached in Cleveland on that side of the ball, at least, than in New York. So I think it'd be a better infrastructure for him. So this was a tough one at number 2, but I'm going to land on Abdul Carter and just hope you can get a generational pass rush duo, something similar to what we see Houston having success with down there with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. But then at number 3, the New York Giants. And I actually tweeted this one out to kind of tease this video a little bit because I went back and forth a bunch with this one. Obviously, Jackson Dart, we brought him up in consideration for Cleveland at number 2. And then here again for the Giants, they were able to get him with the 25th pick in the draft while also adding a talent like Abdul Carter. And I just don't think it's realistic that Jackson Dart's going to make it down the board like that again. With everything we've talked about, the upcoming quarterback class isn't as good as we maybe thought. And Dart just has outplayed what I think his draft write-up would have said. I think the creativity and the pocket presence especially have been way more than he got to showcase at Ole Miss. So I think if you're the Giants, you have to think about Jackson Dart here. And I would love to trade down. I don't know that is something on the board for them right now or not. Ideally, yeah, you would move down 7 spots and then still hope to get Jackson Dart. But even then, are you going to let the Raiders or the Jets or the Saints have an opportunity to look at Jackson Dart and take him there? So it's a risk, even if you do trade down. So I think if you're the Giants, what would really suck would be to come out of this situation and then not have your quarterback. And I think if you were the Giants, especially compared to the Browns, I think some people are like, well, if the Giants would take Dart at 3, why wouldn't the Browns at 2? Well, Dart is their guy. They've seen him in their system. Obviously, there's a coaching change coming up, but we'll see if they end up keeping Kafka as the play caller to kind of keep that nice trajectory with Dart in that system anyway. But I think it does matter that he is their guy, and he has had success in New York versus Cleveland's projecting him into a different system with different teammates, different coaches, you name it. It just sometimes, as simple as that, it just doesn't mesh. So I think it is much more reasonable for the Giants to take Jackson Dart here at number 3. It's not an easy pill to stomach if you're a Giants fan in this, weird dream, weird made up scenario, but it definitely feels good knowing you come back to reality and it's like, wait, yeah, we do have Jackson Dart and we did get him at 26 at a value. So that's good. Then for number 4 for New England, I'm going to keep this simple. I'm going to stay put with Will Campbell. There was a lot of conversations from me when they made this pick. I number 1 questioned if Teteroa McMillan was going to be an overall better player. I had a higher upside projection on someone like T-Mac at his position than I did on Will Campbell at his position. I haven't seen too much to really change my opinion on the long-term upside projection. I still think Will Campbell he's been very good. I still think with some of the trait deficiencies, I love the Bernard Raymond comp which I put on Will Campbell, which is a top 10 to 15 left tackle. And that's a very useful player, especially when you're looking for stability on the offensive line. But I think it is very much in consideration. Do we think about T-Mac, who I said coming out was one of the 3 or 4, if you include Ashton Ginty at that running back position, that's not as valuable. True blue chip talents, which I just don't go throwing that tag around. T-Mac is absolutely in consideration here. And then you also have to talk about Armin Membu, who your division rival Jets ended up getting. Definitely, I think you look at his physical ability and how he's playing this year at right tackle, and question if maybe you think about going for a little bit more upside at that tackle spot, or, asking him to move over to left tackle. We don't know if he can do that. That's a big reason why they settled on Campbell over Membu, was he didn't have to change positions. But it's all very fascinating, right? I think any of those 3 picks, you really couldn't go wrong, but I am going to keep it simple and stay put with Will Campbell here, having seen the success that they've had with Will Campbell, just plugging in that left tackle, being that blindside pass protector that Drake May is able to not really worry about all the time, and being able to operate the way he has. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So I think you stay put and take Will Campbell at number 4. But then at number 5, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who very well could sit here and still come away with their guy in Travis Hunter after they gave up 3 first-round picks. Now, if you asked that building, who clearly believes in Travis Hunter more than even anybody out there, they put their balls on the table and went to go get him. They would probably double down and go back to Travis Hunter. And I don't think that would be crazy, right? It's obviously year 1 for Travis Hunter. It hasn't gone as according to plan. Like I said, they probably don't do the trade up again if we're in this scenario. But even though the 2-position thing, managing that didn't go as according to plan after the draft, when they were like, yep, he's full go both positions, that's been harder to see to reality for a rookie. And then the injury, obviously, and I do think about injuries with this, just kind of putting that into the whole picture on who you're drafting here, assuming that the same injuries happen again and all that. I think, why wouldn't you consider that, even if it's a debatable topic on if you should in an experiment like this? But I am including thinking about the injuries. But at least with Travis Hunter, when he's played, he's looked good on both sides. I think at wide receiver, when they did want to throw him the ball downfield, you see the incredible ball skills, and then at corner, he's made plays. He's had more good tape at corner than bad, in my opinion. So I think you could absolutely stay here and take Travis Hunter. All that said, I'm going to go with the more, at this point, proven commodity in Teteroa McMillan, who in a Panthers passing game that, outside of a couple of big Bryce Young weeks, the Panthers passing game has been deplorable at points in the season. There's also been weeks where the offense is playing well, but it's because of their run game, and you're just not going to get the stats to your number 1 wide receiver, in those game scripts to make it look like T-Mac is having this all-time great rookie season. But if you load up the tape on T-Mac and watch his targets, and it's not like the production is bad either, right? He's going to surpass 1,000 yards. He's got the 6 touchdowns. There's still good production in there, and again, in a situation that isn't exactly lucrative for a guy to have a bunch of production. But you look at the way that this guy can move in his routes, especially after the catch. You see the way he can pull away on these crossing routes. He can impact the field as a vertical threat. Some of the just most incredible catches you've seen all year. I actually would say he also has gotten some rookie treatment with defensive pass interference, in my opinion. There's been a notable amount of plays where he's just getting mugged down the field. And sure, as a young player, as a young Mike Evans or a young Drake London, these big wide receivers would have had to adjust to. He's going to have to get better and better at fighting back and maybe selling those penalties a little bit more as well. But he's been getting mugged down the field, and a lot of times it hasn't been called as well. Not to make too many excuses there. There's been some drops with him, which are frustrating, but I made this mock draft pick a lot when we were doing mock drafts pre-draft, comparing him to being Liam Cohen's Mike Evans in this offense, though he's so much more dynamic than Mike Evans, and that's not to disrespect Mike Evans, who's going to go to the Hall of Fame pretty much as soon as he retires. But T-Mac's just a more explosive overall athlete while also giving you all of the same benefits of a Mike Evans. So for me, I do just feel better moving forward with McMillan in this situation. You're going to put Brian Thomas into a certified wide receiver 2 opportunity, whereas with Travis Hunter, it's like that's still up in the air with the 2 position thing, and can Travis Hunter reach that number 1 wide receiver mark? I think with the downs we've seen from Brian Thomas, you want him as a wide receiver 2, as opposed to when they took Travis Hunter, it was like, well, he can play both ways while Brian Thomas is the number 1. I think that idea has changed a little bit. And then you also have a very nice complementary piece now over the middle of the field if they do decide to bring Jacoby Myers back. So there's a long discussion on who the Jags would take at number 5, but for me, it would be T-Mac, Tet McMillan. Then at number 6, the Las Vegas Raiders. There's no way they're taking Ashton Jeanty again, right? This is the most easy redo for a team, and it's because of how bad their offensive line has been, right? Jeanty just has had nowhere to go. He's still, I think, 4th in the NFL in missed tackle forced rate. He's doing the thing that you drafted Jeanty to do, but it's just not mattering because there's just this swarm of defenders every time he touches the ball. The Raiders have to look into their trenches and improve, whether it's O-line or D-line, but the best player in that situation is on the O-line. It is, sorry Jets fans, Armin Membu is going to the Raiders. And I would argue, outside of the injuries, where Jackson Powers-Johnson has gotten hurt and Colton Miller hasn't been available at left tackle, that right tackle spot has been the biggest problem from the Raiders. DJ Glaze, God bless his soul. I thought year 2, there was going to be some promise there where as a rookie, he had some really good games. He had some athleticism coming out of Maryland. This dude has no anchor. It has gotten worse and worse, seemingly as the year's gone on. You need a right tackle. You need a lot of pieces on this team, but that one is a pressing need. Armin Membu would plug right in there, and then you can actually look at this, say, okay, JPJ comes back healthy, Colton Miller comes back. You've actually got a better infrastructure there to build around. Then with the Jets at number 7, I think you think about what we said about the Jets going into this draft, and it was they're going to take a tackle at number 7 was kind of common analysis. There was some consideration maybe for tight ends and stuff as well. Guys like Tyler Warren were in consideration here and still are, but I think one of the biggest kind of cozy feelings about the Jets, that fireplace at home with this rebuild that is kind of a light burning bright that they're going to just kind of be able to build around, is that offensive line. And even if you can't get Armin Membu, who you're thrilled about, obviously, in real life that you were able to get him, I still think you take Kelvin Banks and you ask either him or Olu to kick over to right tackle, whoever's more comfortable with it, and you're still going to have that light on in that fireplace. You're still going to have the O-line infrastructure to build around. I think some of the midseason additions they've made for wide receivers show some promise that deserve some runway, with guys like Adonai Mitchell really stepping up, and even John Mechie. So I think with Garrett Wilson and hopefully down the board, you can get one of those tight ends. I think even if it is, Mason Taylor, probably will go in about the same spot in a redraft. Again, 3,000 likes, you guys, and I will do a second round. But I think it's kind of similar to the Giants, where it's like if you walk out of this and you have that gaping hole at right tackle, you just kind of feel gross about it. So I think even if Kelvin Banks has been a pretty high floor, pretty good rookie tackle compared to Membu, who's been like borderline Pro Bowl right tackle out the gate, it's not quite as exciting, but it still gives you some of that same coziness with the O-line. Now, before we go to Carolina at number 8, who's not going to get their guy T-Mac anymore, I want to thank the sponsor for today's video, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog's Pick'em contests are the perfect pairing with all of your NFL games, where you set your Pick'em lineups, taking player stats higher or lower. You can go anywhere from just 2 players if you want more of a safer entry. You can go up to 8 if you want to swing for a grand slam payout. And as you watch the game, sometimes these games get out of hand, but you might be waiting on that wide receiver 2 to get his 44 receiving yards, or waiting to see if that QB is going to throw the interception you thought he was going to throw. It really will help maximize your entertainment in some of these games that, let's face it, the dog days of the season are here for some teams. And sometimes those games show up on Monday night, Thursday night, coming up Saturday games. Those island games, underdog lineups really come in handy. You can also play for MLB, NHL, and countless other sports as well. They've got golf and esports on there, you name it. And right now, if you sign up using code TFG, you have 5 days left, actually, until December 8th to get the special promo offer of when you play just $5, they will give you a bonus match up to $100. That's going to be going away on December 8th. So this is the last chance to take advantage of that and to support this channel in the process. Good luck, everybody, with your Pick'em entries. Please do play responsibly. And let's get back to the video with the Carolina Panthers, who have the number 8 pick and aren't able to see T-Mac fall right into their lap. Still thought the NFL completely overthought that one, but that's why we're here now. So I think Travis Hunter is their pick here, and I think you're perfectly happy with that if you're a Panthers fan. Yeah, it's not T-Mac, but you get a guy that is, I think, going to be primarily a wide receiver for you, because obviously right now without T-Mac, you're looking at that room and saying, all right, Xavier Legette, up and down season. Jalen Coker looked great last week. You got some tight ends you like, but you do definitely need some juice and overall playmaking ability. Yeah, Legette's a vertical weapon. But I like the way Travis Hunter plugs in there. And then I actually really like him in an Ejiro Evero defense. It's very zone heavy, where you've got a couple outside corners you like in J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson, but you can kind of pick your spots with Travis Hunter, at least out the gate. Give a guy like Mike Jackson a breather, maybe, because he's a bigger guy. I'm not questioning his stamina, but it might be nice for a 6'2", 215-pound corner to get a drive off here or there, so he can come in, play some outside corner there. You could even mix and match Travis Hunter as like a dime safety and just let him ball hawk a little bit. But I do like the fit here, and I think you're perfectly happy getting Travis Hunter, even though, like I said, we're factoring in the fact that, yes, he got hurt. He is a more slender athlete, that, playing two sides of the ball. It hasn't quite gone according to plan with Travis Hunter, but still a value, I think, at number 8 because the board fell the way it did. Then we have at number 9, the New Orleans Saints, who are pretty bummed, I think, that they don't have their franchise left tackle. And there's not really one on the board outside of, I guess, Josh Simmons, but we're going to have a conversation about him in a little bit, and you'll kind of see why I'm not taking Josh Simmons at number 9 here. I'm going to go with Tyler Warren, though. I think if you're going to have some O-line questions with a young quarterback, which may or may not end up being Tyler Shuck, by the way, that's, I guess we do need to talk about that too. I'll get there. But if you're going to have questionable quarterback, maybe more shady offensive line play, to get a superstar talent like Tyler Warren that's going to help your run blocking, but also in a quick outlet for schemed up passes, RPOs, running up the seam, just a quarterback's best friend like Tyler Warren, as he's been for Daniel Jones. I just think this talent makes sense with those tackles gone. And there's not really a defensive talent that's like screaming at me here either, because obviously that Saints defense needs some help. Now, you could think about Tyler Shuck. I think if you're sitting there with the Saints, you probably risk that he could fall to you. And if he doesn't, I think you really like what you've seen. But I just don't think you're so encouraged by that at this point in time that you take him at number 9. It's a different conversation. And you guys know I like Tyler Shuck a lot. I think it's a different conversation when you're spending the 40th pick on that guy versus the number 9 pick. And I think that's fair. Maybe you try to trade down and navigate things that way, but we're just going to stick and pick and grab Tyler Warren, a hell of a football player here for the Saints. And I think if that QB ends up just being Spencer Rattler for a short period of time until you find the right, draft pick, this is a long-term rebuild for New Orleans anyway. I think deviating from the Tyler Shuck timeline isn't the end of the world if you're New Orleans. I think it's fun to be on the Tyler Shuck timeline, I think, at this point, but deviating is a reasonable path here as well. But then for the Chicago Bears at number 10, I think they would be totally happy to stick and take the guy they took originally in Colston Loveland. And, if you're a Bears fan in the comments and that's what you want to do here, I think that's a totally reasonable opinion here. I think Loveland's played great, even better than I thought he would early in his career. He's stepped in and been a much more pro-ready tight end, and he's made some really, impressive physical catches over the middle of the field, but clutch catches as well. I think you're very excited about Loveland, but they do have a chance to draft someone that they didn't get a chance in real life to draft that I still think you take, and that's Ashton Ginty. Man, when you look at that Ben Johnson run scheme, the O-line additions that were all through free agency, so in a redraft environment, those guys are all in place here. It's the opposite of what Ginty is dealing with the Raiders. You're talking about a run scheme that's going to give Ginty about as much, if not the most, space before contact than anybody in the league compared to being dead last with the Raiders. The talent is still there with Ashton Ginty, and you put him here, you're getting just I don't want to say generational run game, but you're getting that transformative, something in the eyes of what the Colts have with Jonathan Taylor or what the Eagles had with Saquon last year. I see it kind of on that plane of existence. Whereas, right now, like Swift is running really hard. You obviously end up getting Kyle Monangai in the 7th round. You're probably not getting him that late again in a redraft situation here, right? So you're going to have to take him a little bit earlier. But why couldn't Swift still be a nice complement as more of a speed player to Ashton Ginty? And then you can take that, like I said, Monangai would probably have to be more of a 3rd or 4th round pick in this situation because he does look so good. You can take that pick and put it towards somewhere else, right? So I think you take Ashton Ginty here. I'm curious what Bears fans would do, though, if you'd rather have Ginty or Loveland. Then at number 11, the San Francisco 49ers. I think they take Mason Graham here, who's falling a little bit. I said it earlier. I don't think he's played up to the level of a top 5 draft pick. He's still been good. He's a great athlete on the D-line. He can get off some blocks, and, he's kind of just shown up in different phases, but you haven't felt him as a dominant impact with the Browns, but still very young. I don't love that they asked him to add so much weight. I don't know why these Michigan D tackles, they just keep getting to the league, and then the league's like, change your play style. Dallas did it with Mazi Smith. The Browns did it with Mason Graham. I don't really understand that. I think the Niners would be totally fine with him playing at the 295 pounds that he was supposed to come into the league at, right? They've historically really leaned into a lot of twists in games and undersized fronts, leaning on the athleticism and the slanting ability of these guys. I think that would be a much better scheme fit for Mason Graham, and I think the Niners would be ecstatic to get him at number 11. And even if Mason Graham wasn't here, it's also worth noting, I don't think you're taking Mykel Williams again. First off, because of how he played, and then he suffers a season-ending injury. I don't know that we're going to see Mykel Williams go in the first round here. But then at number 12, the Dallas Cowboys actually turns into a pretty tough choice here because both of their first couple of picks are heavily in consideration here. I think you look at the way Donovan Ezeraku played as their 2nd round pick. If you're realistic about this and you're Dallas, you're like, man, we probably aren't getting him and Tyler Booker again unless we trade up. So you have to kind of make a decision, I think, between those two guys that have both been big staples in their success. I think the guard, Tyler Booker, is the harder piece to acquire. They have other edge players in that room, even despite the Micah Parsons trade, right? They ended up signing Clowney. You got Dante Fowler, Sam Williams. They added James Houston, James Houston. There's 4 other guys there that can play in that spot. They don't have another guard. So I think you take Tyler Booker, who's been every bit as advertised as a high floor impact rookie guard, and just take it to the bank. Then at number 13, the Miami Dolphins, who originally took Kenneth Grant, the nose tackle, who's playing better as of late. I don't think it's off the table to take Kenneth Grant again, but I think when you assess how he hasn't played up to the 13th overall pick, there's a development track required with Kenneth Grant for sure. But even more so, you look at how poorly the Jonah Savaiinaea trade-up has gone for this Dolphins team. They utilized 3 key draft picks. I think a 2nd, a 3rd, and a 4th. I don't know if those were all in this year, but I'm pretty sure it was a second, third, and fourth round pick to move up in the second round and take Jonas Savaiinaea. You got to avoid that move at all costs. And you look at Gray Zabel for the Seahawks, that's just been every bit as good as advertised, who's a great athlete. That's the thing with the Dolphins is with Mike McDaniel there, and I really think we're going to get another year of Mike McDaniel and should get another year of McDaniel. You need athletes to run that pin and pull system, that crack toss system, and Zabel can absolutely do that. So I think you think about Kenneth Grant, but you especially look at how bad the Savaiinaea move went, and you're like, we'll take those extra 3-round picks and we'll beef up the D-line there, maybe in what is a deeper draft class. So it's Gray Zabel with the 13th pick. And then at number 14, the Colts. Well, you can't get Tyler Warren, so I think we'll take Colston Loveland, who's a different player than Tyler Warren, but I think you can realistically put him back into that system and do most of the same stuff. I think, honestly, Loveland has probably shown a little more as a route runner and in contested catches. And even but the inline blocking, I think, for both of these guys has been pretty solid out the gate for what you could have expected. So I think largely you can take Loveland and get similar play to Warren. It's just a little bit of a trade-off because I do think Warren brings a little bit more of the run after catch threat. Some of the fullback alignments, snapping the ball to him as a Wildcat QB is a little bit of a difference there with kind of how these guys are used. But at large, I think with Loveland, how Loveland is played as well on top of Tyler Warren, both these young tight ends look great, and Loveland deserves to go here to Indy, who obviously needs a tight end without Tyler Warren there. Then at number 15, the Atlanta Falcons. I think you stick with Jalen Walker. I think he's been pretty much spot on what they were hoping they were getting with the 15th pick in the draft. I think in this system, especially, he's an amazing fit with his athleticism. A lot of his pressures come off of twists and looping inside, and the fact that they can line him up as this inside rusher. Like, they have done a really good job deploying him, and Jalen Walker has really brought it. Like, I think some of the stuff he's doing as a run defender is really fun to watch. And then you're starting to see the flashes as a pass rusher. I still think there's a long way to go in terms of, can you just line Jalen Walker up and ask him to beat like quality tackles one-on-one? You see the flashes with the pop in his hands and the bend that he has. Like, dude, there is a bull rush to be consistently unlocked there. There's a rip move. There's just a true speed rush that if he can put that all together, you're really hitting a slam dunk player there. So I think sticking and pick him at 15, they're happy with that one, and maybe feeling even a little bit fortunate that he didn't go a few picks earlier than he did in the real draft. Then at number 16, the Arizona Cardinals, who ended up taking Walter Nolan, who looks really good when he's played. Unfortunately, he's been injured. But then at number 16 for the Arizona Cardinals, they originally took Walter Nolan, who I think you could absolutely take again. He's looked outstanding when he's been out there. But I think because of the injuries, you're at least stopping and asking, is there another pick that would be more beneficial to our team and our future? And when I watch the Arizona Cardinals, and I'm curious what Cardinals fans think of this, again, it's not that Walter Nolan doesn't look really exciting, but their problem is the offensive line. I really believe that. I think whether it was Kyler Murray or Jacoby Brissett, that the pure lack of a run game is painful to see. And the pass protection's been really bad too. And that right tackle spot has been a complete eyesore. They thought they could get by with one more year of Jonah Williams at right tackle, who's been horrible and injured. And finally, I think at 36 years old, Kelvin Beachum has reached a point where he's started to really struggle. You need O-line help. And the place to get O-line help is in the top 15, 16 picks of the draft. And for me, this pick is Josh Simmons, the tackle for the Chiefs, that doesn't come without question marks, right? He had the knee injury coming out, but that's a big reason why he's climbing. There was an assumption that Simmons basically might have a lost rookie season, and that's why he was viewed as a late first, early second round type of guy. But the thing you got to remember with Josh Simmons, something I said and many people that watched his tape said, this guy is a top 5 talent in the draft, and he's still falling to 16 here. But the knee stuff seems a little bit more in the past. He seems to have recovered from that. He was out on the field early for the Chiefs, started week 1, right? Now, you might be asking, if he's so good and the knee is so good to go, and he should have been a top 5 pick if the knee injury was good to go, why isn't he going top 5 here? And I'll touch on this because I think it's a good question, and I think this is relevant to this, to today's topic. And I'm not afraid to touch on, more gray area sensitive subjects that maybe the big networks and other people wouldn't touch on. I think it's relevant, and I'm not afraid to touch on this. But when I was out here hyping up Josh Simmons on the channel, I had gotten multiple messages from people saying it's not just the knee, there's other stuff too. Now, I didn't get any info on what the other stuff was, but you do see him step away from the team for about 3 weeks with an undisclosed family issue is all we've heard on it. And I'm not going to speculate any further. It could be something incredibly serious. And I do want to be sensitive to the fact that it could be something that was just incredibly serious and outside of his control. He also might have been dealing with mental health issues, depression, that kind of thing. I don't want to take lightly either, but the fact is we didn't get any information. We have no idea what was going on. And what I do know is that that's not normal to just step away from the team and then not tell the media anything. And when there's other, alarm bells going off pre-draft, it starts to add up. So that's why he's going 16 instead of 9 or 5. And maybe I'm just coming off as an asshole here, but again, I thought it was relevant information, and this is a largely overwhelming positive conversation on just how good Josh Simmons is and would help that offensive line that desperately needs help. But then at number 17, the Cincinnati Bengals, I do not think would be taking Shamar Stewart again. Now, he was always going to be a project. That was a point of contention with this draft pick, right? They need help right now, and they're probably not going to get it from Shamar Stewart, and they sure as hell have not gotten it from Shamar Stewart. Maybe if you ask the Bengals, they would show the, make the same pick, show the same patience. I'm going to go to the same position group, but with a guy that could actually help this defense right now, and that's Donovan Ezeraku, who's looked outstanding for the Dallas Cowboys. Doesn't have the length and the explosiveness and the speed and the power of a Shamar Stewart, but he can get after the quarterback, and he's made an impact for the Dallas Cowboys, a team that I have made jokes about them being the NFC Bengals. Well, here he's just going to flip conferences and go to the Bengals and help that D-line. But then at number 18 for the Seattle Seahawks, who miss out on their guy Gray Zabel here, I think they go to their next guy, a guy that they ended up picking 17 picks later, but has been an outstanding impact and has been, if he hadn't missed the first third of the season, might be getting some love as a defensive rookie of the year candidate, but Nicky Manwari. And I said it the second he got drafted to this team, that this is probably the player that I'm going to be the most wrong about, because I didn't love his deep safety tape, but you put him in that Mike McDonald system. The second the Seahawks draft him, you knew, he's going to be their Kyle Hamilton. They're going to use him in the nickel. They're not going to ask him to, patrol the deep part of the field and make plays on the ball where he did not show the down the field composure as a coverage player. A lot of ugly penalties, unable to locate the ball, bad angles from deep alignments. But you just put him around the line, hook zones, curl flats, blitz, defend, the outside run and fill the run. Like, yeah, that's where his good tape was. Seattle had the vision to put him there, and he's been outstanding. So I think if you're Seattle, you can't get Gray Zabel. You just grab your guy now who you might not be able to get at the same spot you did last time. And then at number 19, this is going to be Emeka Egbuka. I think a lot of people are like, how did Egbuka not go earlier? He's been incredible. And I actually think what we're not talking about with Egbuka is the fact that he has really cooled off from that incredible 5-6 week stretch that he had to start the year. Now, I'm still picking him here for the Bucs. I think he still has shown an upside to his game that I didn't really think he had coming out. I thought he was going to be like a bona fide, like locked and loaded number 2 wide receiver. I think he's shown the ability to get down the field and make some of those crazy catches down the field that make you think like, yeah, man, this guy could be a number 1. But with that workload on his plate as a rookie, we have seen a lot of drops and a lot of times where very quietly the Bucs have had to like really lean on him with all these other injuries. And he just hasn't been able to, put that weight on his shoulders and hold up. So I think if we did this week 7, he probably would have gone in the top 12 picks or so. But I think, seeing him cool off a little bit, I think back where he went makes a lot of sense. But you make this pick, I think, with even more conviction than you did originally, having seen some of the upside play from him as well. Because I think the assumption is, sure, the drops and some of the rookie moments, those will work themselves out. And then you could be talking about, I think you've seen maybe some shades of maybe a Cooper Kupp. Some of those big catches he had, I saw some Cooper Kupp in there, which would be incredible with the 19th pick, obviously. So we'll see if Igbuka can get to those heights, a guy that once won the Triple Crown, right? But then at number 20, with the Denver Broncos, I think with the way McMillan has stepped up in the slot and kind of held off Jahdae Barron, I don't think you take Jahdae Barron again. It's not that Barron's been bad, but I just think there's other players that could help this team more, that you would go in a different direction. So that's going to be Jahad Campbell here for the Denver Broncos, the linebacker that had injury concerns, goes to the Eagles, and then has been available since week 1. And maybe I'm underthinking this, and he should have gone even higher, but obviously an 11-spot increase for Jahad Campbell. Putting him in that Denver Broncos defense would be insane. Unfortunately for them, we have hindsight to know that number one, Dre Greenlaw just has been largely unavailable for them. Their big free agent signing, that was a risk that they took on an injury-plagued player, and he's played 5 games this year, so there's that. And then Alex Singleton, very incredible story. And we're actually not really replacing him in this situation anyway. But with him bouncing back mid-season from them locating testicular cancer, incredible story. But the reality is he's an older linebacker that has really struggled in coverage this year. There is definitely room for Jahad Campbell, especially for a defense that loves to blitz. You put Jahad Campbell's blitzing ability into this group, it could be, take an already amazing pass rush and take it to another level. And I think some of the run defense stuff and the coverage IQ has really been impressive for Jahad Campbell. This would be a pretty slam dunk pick for Denver. And honestly, there's multiple teams ahead of us here that you could be thinking about Campbell as well. Teams like Cincinnati, Arizona, Tampa, even for sure. It just they're able to get him at 20 here. And then at pick 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is going to be a controversial one. I'm curious what Steelers fans think of this. I think I know what their answer is going to be, but I'm going to put Tyler Shuck here to the Steelers with the 21st pick. And what sucks is there is just such an unfair wave of hate against this player because of his age. And maybe I'm just putting this in here because I'm an annoying draft analyst that wants to gloat, but I am very proud of the fact that I went to bat for Tyler Shuck. I remember so vividly. He was like the last quarterback I watched, and I was like, am I crazy, or is this one of the better quarterbacks in this draft? And I just kept watching film on him to make sure I wasn't crazy. And I wish I would have gone that final step further and made him QB2, but I still got a lot of heat for having him as kind of a top 50 player or so, very much in that coming out, the Jackson Dart, Shedeur, Tyler Shuck range was that category for me after Cam Ward. And I'm proud of how that's aged and how he went 40th. I remember going on the NFL Stock Exchange podcast, and they threw me the Cleveland Browns pick at 33, and I was like, Tyler Shuck is the pick for me. And I kind of said it in jest. I was like, kidding but not kidding. I think my take on that show was I would rather trade down and get him at like 45, but if I have to take him at 33, for me, it's not crazy. And there's still a long way to go here with Tyler Shuck, right? He's started 4 games at this point. But you see the pocket presence, you see the athleticism, you see the arm talent. He is the most misunderstood quarterback as a prospect because people see the age and think he just is what he is and there's no upside there. But if you actually watch the tape, you realize, wait, he kind of has everything you look for in a franchise quarterback. Yeah, he's got this clouded record and that's why he ends up going later. But you watch him on the Saints, and you can really see a guy in a far from ideal situation, navigating the rush, making largely good decisions with the ball, pushing the ball downfield, showing the play extension. There's a lot to like in Tyler Shuck. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers In this world, you're probably going to have him sitting behind Aaron Rodgers, but we know Aaron Rodgers and his durability, major concern. Shuck probably is getting some starts for you in this first season. And then you get a very simple out for a Steelers team that is perennially mid, right? They're never picking high in the draft. So you get a chance at a QB that does actually have the requisite traits to be a franchise quarterback. And you're getting that rookie contract that helps you mitigate a very old and expensive defense. And I actually think him in an Arthur Smith system could work. Distributing the ball and then creating some plays, making some magic happen with a DK Metcalf. If you do get into those third down situations. So we're going to go Shuck here at 21, and I'm curious what Steelers fans think about this. My honest guess is Steelers fans largely probably haven't watched a lot of Saints games and probably are going to hate this, but a lot of people hated it when I talked up Tyler Shuck pre-draft, and no reason to kind of change course there yet. But at number 22, the LA Chargers. They took a Marion Hampton here, and I think with how well Kamani Vidal has played, despite all of the Chargers' efforts to not give him an opportunity, I don't know that you necessarily feel the need to take a running back here, especially as the board has fallen differently for them. I think a big reason they went running back is because the D tackles had all gone. Yet in this scenario, they actually get their pick of the litter. All of those top D tackles other than Mason Graham are still there. And I think you do go that route. If you're the Chargers, you let Vidal be the starter and beef up this interior of the D-line that's just been a mess. So I would go and take Walter Nolan here. But you could take, honestly, Walter Nolan, Derek Harmon, or get the Michigan guy in Kenneth Grant. I think those would all be good options. They're all a little bit different style players. But Walter Nolan, the pick for me, I think he, at least when he's played, has showed that he's a beast. And I would rather bet on that guy, even though he's been dealing with some nagging injuries in his rookie season, than Derek Harmon, that's been just not a big impact on a Steelers D-line that you thought he would be a bigger impact. He's had flashes, don't get me wrong. Like I said, he's in consideration here, but not to the efficiency that Nolan's played with when he's been out there. And Kenneth Grant brings you more of that freaky size profile, but he just hasn't played even at the level of Derek Harmon. So I'm gonna roll the dice with Walter Nolan here. It could be any of those options. In fact, with our next pick, it's going to be one of those players off the board again with the Green Bay Packers at number 23. And this one pains me a little bit because I sold this as one of the best picks in the first round when they took Matthew Golden. And I think you go back in time without hindsight, you make that pick all over again, right? And this really is not anti-Matthew Golden analysis. In fact, when he's played and gotten his targets, he's looked outstanding. But Romeo Doubs has also had a major breakout season in Green Bay. And fun fact, that was my low-end pro comp on Matthew Golden. Very similar skill sets. And I think when Green Bay made this pick, it was the same thing I was saying, where you can't count on Doubs to stay healthy. And Christian Watson at the time, we didn't know if he was going to play this year. And he has had a miraculous recovery, and he looks great. So the script has flipped with Green Bay, where you had these major questions at wide receiver. You needed to raise your floor in that room, when actually the guy that's been hurt is Matthew Golden, has been out for like 7 weeks. So I think the need to take Matthew Golden has faded. I think you can address a different position here that has actually surfaced as a larger need, because since the draft, they traded Kenny Clark in the Micah Parsons trade and have created this big hole at DT. And with the board falling in the way that it has, I think you go and take Derek Harmon here. The athlete that fits this system, like we said with the Niners, they love these guys that can move around, use their athleticism, penetrate, all that kind of stuff. And Derek Harmon can absolutely do that, plays at about 300 pounds as a great athlete. I think they would lean more towards that than a Kenneth Grant type, and I think Harmon has shown to be a better player than Kenneth Grant early. But yeah, this is not anti-Matthew Golden. I still believe in Matthew Golden, the player, big time. It's just the opportunities haven't been there with guys ahead of him and the injuries. And I think Green Bay probably pivots here to Derek Harmon. But then with the 24th pick, the Minnesota Vikings, I do not think you take Donovan Jackson again. He just, kind of like we said with him coming out, like, he's just more of a day 2 guard prospect, and it always felt like they took him a little bit early. And it's not that he's been a bad player necessarily, but obviously they've had O-line issues, and I don't think necessarily like going away from him is going to make a huge difference when there's other guys that are just more worth this pick. And for me, I'm actually going to take Malachi Starks, someone I did mock to Minnesota a lot back then. And I don't think Starks has even been quite as good as we thought he would be coming out as another one of these like just super high floor safeties with some upside as well. I think it's come along in Baltimore, but it hasn't been perfect coverage, perfect execution on the back end from him. There's been more of a development process with him, but still, you put him here where he technically doesn't even have to play right away. I think he would. But you have Harrison Smith, who it was a question if he was going to play again this year. But you let Cam Bynum go, and Theo Jackson just has been adequate back there. There is a need at safety. And in that secondary overall, I think they could find ways to get him out there. And he would be a much more valuable, worthwhile pick than Donovan Jackson, who's been, a below average guard in his rookie year and will probably end up being an okay player. But we're talking about first round picks here, and I don't think you make that pick again. But then at number 25, with the Houston Texans, this was where they had traded down into the top of the second round for the Giants to come up for Jackson Dart. And I actually had some fun with this one. I have Houston picking up the phone yet again and trading down yet again in very similar fashion. I think it did make sense for them and has largely worked out for them. I think there is a team in that range, not the Giants, but the Cleveland Browns with the 33rd pick that know they're probably not getting their guy at 33, Carson Schlesinger, who's been every bit a defensive rookie of the year candidate and looks outstanding. Why not come up and make sure you get that guy? Because if you don't have him in the middle of that defense, you have some major linebacker problems. So Houston makes basically the same trade. They go down to 33, and then Cleveland has to be a little bit aggressive here to come up and get their guy in this redraft. Then at number 26, the LA Rams. This again was where they traded down with the Falcons, and the Falcons, what they know now, cannot make that trade again. They are getting just absolutely bashed for it. There's aspects of the trade that you can defend. You have an exciting young edge rush duo, but you just can't give a top 10 pick to your former team if you're Raheem Morris. That's pretty self-explanatory. So I don't think the Falcons make this big offer and offer a first-round pick to come up. And then I think the Rams stay put. The player I'm going to have them take is in the same line with what they ended up doing with their first pick in the real draft, which was Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. I'm going to give them Harold Fannin Jr., though. Fannin, who ended up going in the third round. And by the way, this is a testament to the Browns draft, seeing back-to-back, guys going earlier than they did. But the big question with Fannin and why he fell to the third round was not skill. It was not production. It was he's an undersized tweener player who ran slow. And there were questions if his game at a lower level of competition at Bowling Green was going to translate to the NFL. That was the major question. But he was one of these guys that, if you see it translate early, you're going to know immediately that guy can ball. And that's exactly what's happened with Harold Fannin. He's able to do pretty much all the same stuff he did at Bowling Green for the Browns. He's a savvy route runner. He makes tough catches. He's incredible after the catch. His ball-knowing ability, his football IQ is tremendous. And I do think, especially for the Rams, the pinnacle team that does not care about physical traits, right? They'll take the slow, undersized running back. They'll pick up the 160-pound corner or the 5'9" corner. The Puka Nacua, who didn't test as well as he, ran on his GPS tracking. This is what they're all about. Now that they know Harold Fannin for sure can play, and that the Rams have they've totally discovered this idea of running 12 personnel and 13 personnel, really loading up these heavy formations and the schematic advantages it can give them. It's not that Terrence Ferguson's been anything short of good for them. I think Harold Fannin opens up even more for them, and the run after catch ability is such a weapon for them. the scheme fit for me makes way too much sense. Basically, for them to use him similar, just like I said with Harold Fannon's pro comp coming out, as a slower Brock Bowers, using him in a very similar mold where he would also play a lot of wide receiver for them as well. So curious what Rams fans think about that, with Fannin being the largest riser, 41 spots up. I guess we should have known he would have been great, though, as he was the 67th pick in the draft in the year of 6-7. But then at number 27, the Baltimore Ravens, their guy, Malachi Starks, is gone. Also, Mike Green, by the way, has been so bad for them, and their pass rush has been so bad. I think you have to go pass rusher here, and this is where I would take James Pierce Jr., who ends up going around the same range he went, just the pick before in reality with the Falcons trading up. But I think James Pierce has shown some pass rush juice and would make an early impact for this Ravens defense. Doesn't give you much run defense support out the gate, but that's not the primary issue for the Ravens. It's an issue. But their inability for those edge guys to get after the QB has been, I would say, a major problem, and James Pierce would absolutely help that. And then at number 28, the Detroit Lions. Got a fun super chat question about this in last week's podcast about why don't the Lions get more criticism for not addressing the number 2 edge spot? And I totally agree. Like, that was probably a whiff by this front office. Not that Tyreek Williams has been a bad player, but you have nose tackles there, right? Tyreek Williams just hasn't made a major impact. Whereas, like Al-Qadim Muhammad has played well, but he's a 31-year-old journeyman edge guy. I think you look at that Lions team, they need more guys in that edge room. And Nick Scorton was staring them in the face as a perfect fit for that defense. He projects as like the perfect number 2 type of guy. My pro comp on him was always George Karlaftis, and I've seen a lot of that in his game already out the gate for the Panthers. I just think this would be a much more useful pick for Detroit that would help their pass rush, their run defense even, I think would be a little bit better with more, physical bodies on the perimeter. Like, I think they got enough dudes on the inside. Roy Lopez has stepped up there on the inside as well. So I think in a redo, you go with Nick Scorton here to Detroit. Then we got Washington at number 29. I struggled a little bit with this one because Josh Connerly, their original first-round pick, struggled out the gate, but I always thought he was a guy that probably shouldn't be starting year one anyway. I like the idea of him maybe sitting, bulking up, learning a little bit behind some veterans on that O-line first. And they've thrown him into the fire right away. And it was ugly at first, but honestly, you look back at the last 4 or 5 weeks when this Commanders team has been pretty unwatchable, and at least John Connerly's actually settled back in. And that's really encouraging. You don't want to create a big issue on the offensive line, especially as Jaden Daniels has shown some injury concerns. So I think you make this pick again and feel encouraged with the development from him and hope he can lock in as that franchise right tackle with him and Laramie Tunsil being a cornerstone tackle duo. I think you do it again. Then at number 30, the Buffalo Bills. They took Maxwell Harrison, who's been pretty good when he's played, but he's been very beat up. I think you could take him again, but when you look at the Bills, their lack of a vertical weapon in the passing game, they schemed around it last year and obviously got by with it last year and were willing to go into this year with a similar approach. I think teams have figured them out much more, and they have felt compressed in their passing game. They need an outside wide receiver that can open up their passing game, and in this scenario, Matthew Golden is there. And I would take Matthew Golden here, who I also just think is a better overall prospect than Maxwell Harrison. There's that as well. But I think it's a bigger need as well. And I know there's been a large cooling on Matthew Golden because of the lack of production in his first season. I really do look at his circumstances with the injury for the last month and a half, and then early in the year, that he was behind Romeo Doubs breaking through, and even Tucker Kraft was having a breakout year. So there just wasn't a ton of quality targets to go his way early. I still really do believe in the player as a first-round caliber guy, and Buffalo would be just the perfect fit. Especially as well with the hindsight that the Keon Coleman thing has been rough. I mean, he's been a healthy scratch some weeks. So feeling more like a need now, especially than it was back then. And you've got a better player falling to you at 30 that wasn't there 6 months ago or whatever it was. Then at number 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. who I had to remember actually flipped with the Eagles at 32. I'm taking a Marion Hampton here. Josh Simmons is gone, so you can't go that route. I've been really hard on this team for not pulling the trigger on trading for Breece Hall. They've recently discovered that they need to be more of a run-heavy team, that's kind of the strength of their team at times, yet Kareem Hunt going 4 yards at a time is just really inefficient football. Hampton gives you everything you need at this wide receiver, at this running back position, a true number one stud. A little bit of a slower start for Hampton. It was weird. It felt like he was kind of second guessing himself on his runs early, but settled in and started to play with that confidence. And then he gets hurt, but I still think he's well worth kind of a late first round type of pick, and has quickly become the biggest need on the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's a fairly easy choice for me to make. And then at number 32 for the Eagles, obviously Jahad Campbell was the pick. He's gone. Well, Campbell had some injury questions. They rolled the dice on him. Why not go with another guy that was in that category, Will Johnson, who has been able to play here in year one for the Cardinals. He has missed some time, so some of those, he was really the peak narrative guy of how did he fall to the second round, because he was kind of this locked up top 20 guy, and there was a lot of medical stuff on him, and he's missed a lot of time, so there's a risk there. It's why he's still falling to 32, but when he's played, he's looked like a top 15 talent in the draft. He's been really good for the Cardinals. It's just such a bummer that he's been getting banged up. But he perfectly fits Vic Fangio's system, that CB2 spot that they thought they were filling with, Adoree Jackson and Keely Ringo. It just hasn't gone well there. This would solidify, hopefully, if he can stay healthy, an all-timer of a secondary with those guys that they've built back there. And then I will do that 33rd pick for you Texans fans who missed out at number 25. I don't want to screw you over. For me, it's between the two guys that they ended up taking in the second round. Obviously, it's a similar draft process for them, but you got to kind of think about how things have played out. I think you actually take Ariante Ursary now at 33. He's been okay at left tackle. I've talked about this with some glitches in his technique. Sometimes when he loses so ugly that you're like, how is that guy playing? But the underlying metrics on him are pretty solid. And he is a very talented, potential franchise tackle. With the board still falling this way, he's at least been able to plug in at left tackle. And I can't say they haven't had to worry about it, but it hasn't been a disaster. They've been sorting through so much with that offensive line. I don't think you want to lose that element of it where you have a left tackle that you can at least kind of set and forget right now. So I think that's the bigger priority. And it's not that Jaden Higgins, who they ended up taking with the 34th pick and then getting Ursary at 48. It's not that Higgins has looked bad. But I think if you're, with hindsight and other teams looking at Ursary's NFL tape and maybe feeling a little bit better about him, I think you grab him now and hopefully can navigate this after you already traded down to also still get Jaden Higgins. But even if you miss out on Higgins, you've got another pick there, and Jalen Knoll has been really good for you too. So that's going to be the pick at 33. So that's going to do it. Again, 3,000 likes on this video. I will continue round 2 in what was a really fun exercise. I'm curious what you guys think. I don't think it's going to be universal agreement on this. This was honestly a harder process than I thought it was going to be before I sat down to do it, but it was really fun nonetheless, and it led to, I think, some really good conversations about who performed well in the draft, who would maybe do a redo and all that. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers.